All right, we'll just be getting started here in just a minute. We're going to get some people logged in. So if everyone wants to do a quick introduction, you could tell us where you're from. If you're watching this afterwards, not live, you don't have to necessarily give us an introduction. But we will get started here in just a couple minutes. My name is Greg Ondo. Presenting from Northern Virginia in the United States. And all right, so we have some people from UK. We see Tom from Germany. Good to see you. All right. Austining, New York, Connecticut. All right, more people from the UK, who is St. Louis. And if you have questions, please feel free to ask them in the comments field. All right, we have Illinois. And we'll get some people logged in and we'll get started soon. All right, so we have Trevor from England. Good to see you. All right, and we have Calgary. And we had some people emailed some questions. I saw some questions that came in before the Hangout started, so we have those. All right, so we have Spain. We have Dusseldorf. Hope I'm saying that correctly. All right, South Africa. We got the African continent represented so far. That's good. All right, Libya. All right, some Benghazi. Great. Scotland. El Salvador. All right. All right, so we have Jonathan from London. And we have someone that lives on the moon. That's the first time we've had someone from the moon attend a hangout. So that's good. We have Sweden, Moscow, Brazil. All right, we have Taylor from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. Good to see you, Taylor. All right, more UK. All right, so once again, if you have questions, please feel free to type them in the comments field. We had some people who submitted questions in advance. All right, so we have New Hampshire, Indiana. Vinny from Orlando has a new i9 workstation. He's bragging. Congratulations on your new i9. All right, so we have Dave from the UK. We have Knoxville, Tennessee. All right, so I'm seeing can Cubase export to AAF? Currently, it's set up just for OMF, but a lot of people will just do timestamped audio files. And when can we have the mixer colorized? That's going to be, we may see it in future versions. It's something that I've passed on to our marketing people and product planning to kind of see the full channel view. So I could reiterate that again to them. All right, so we have Hungary. We have someone that has their i10. All right, just copying down some notes. We'll get some people logged in and we'll get started. All right, so we have Maximilian from Germany. He's thanking us for all the help. We're glad it's been helpful. All right, just copying over questions. Okay, see a question from Taylor here. All right. All right, and we'll just... All right, so we see Nick, good to see you online. Kyle, hello to you as well. All right, so we have India in the house. All right, more people from Germany. Does Steinberg know? I see a question. Does Steinberg know? Let you know when Cubase 10 will drop? Yeah, there will be all sorts of marketing for new releases of products, so it'll probably be pretty obvious. All right, so we have Sweden, Netherlands. All right. We'll get started here in just a couple minutes. Get some more people logged in. Thanks for all the questions. All right. So I see a question if there's any topic today. So generally what we do is we just go through and answer questions that people have. So it's no particular topic. It's really just whatever questions that you might run into. Just copy over some questions and we'll get started here. We'll give it maybe another 2-3 minutes and get started. All right, we have a lot of people today going to hang out. It's great. All right, so we have Israel. All right, so we have someone from Hamburg. That's great. Oh, Gary Askell is online. Great to see you online. Okay, so more questions coming in. And again, we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, we have Richard Thompson from Texas. More Sweden. Okay, so see a question about EQ. We'll go over that. All right, so we have Patrick from Sacramento. So I see a question, will Steinberg move away from e-licenser in the future? I'm sure that they're exploring other alternative stuff, but you have to kind of make sure that, you know, everything is kind of secure so we can stay in business and deliver great solutions. All right, so we have London in the house again, so some more people from London. Okay, just get some more questions and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so we have Javier. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, from the Florida Keys. I love the Florida Keys. I always kind of describe it as the Caribbean that you can drive to from America. So I've been there lots of times and love the Florida Keys. So I've been seeing a question, is there a Cubase certification course where they teach basic productions and mixing? There are some people who are doing courses, but a lot of times people are just kind of learning a lot of stuff from YouTube videos. Okay. Okay, we'll get started here in just a minute. A lot of questions coming in. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll get started. So we see a question, is Cubase free? You know, sometimes people can get a Cubase LE or Cubase AI with different hardware, but basically there's going to be different options starting at Cubase Elements, which in the US is around $99, up to the Cubase Pro, which is about $579. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with questions that were sent in, and we'll catch up. So we have a lot of great questions. So this came from a question from 2 hangouts ago or from the last hangout, which I neglected to get to. But we had someone that wanted to know an easy way to enter notes in the score editor. That was pretty an easy way of doing it. So with Cubase 9.5, there is a new method where we could enter in some notes using kind of computer keyboard. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at that. So I'm going to just double click here and we'll look at our score editor in the bottom zone here. So now as I do this, I can do step entry. So if you have a computer keyboard, you could activate step entry. And if you wanted to just kind of come here, and as you play notes in from a MIDI keyboard, you can have those notes kind of automatically entered in with so let's say I just want to do quick step entry. So that could do it. And this rhythm will be based upon your quantized presets. So if you wanted to put in half notes, we can now just, as we have half notes set as our quantized value, you can now just kind of, we'll come here and set half notes for our quantized value. And at that point, you could just now put in different half note phrases like that. Now, another method that was added, if you don't have a MIDI controller, that is very helpful, is to actually come here and do what we call computer keyboard input. And this would allow you just to type the pitch of the key. So let's say if I want to put in quarter notes, I can now just type in like C, D, E, F, G, A, F, D, F, E, F, and just hitting the computer keys on the computer keyboard. Now, if you wanted to change the pitch chromatically, you could use the up and down arrow keys. If you want to use the page up and page down, or on the Mac, that's going to be the function up and function down. That'll allow you to jump via octaves, just like that. If you hold down Shift and go directly to the left and right arrows, you could elongate the rhythmic values or you could shorten the rhythmic values that you enter in. So if I wanted to just put in straight quarter notes, and let's say if I want to put a rest in, I just hit the right arrow key, and then I could just put in my rest where no notes are. So this way you could just kind of enter that in. So check out some of the different options that you have from the computer keyboard input. And I think that that would make some sense for what you're doing. That's kind of a fast way of doing it. Some people will choose their rhythmic value here and be able to, just draw in particular notes. If you wanted to drop them in with a mouse, you could do that. It may not be the fastest method to enter in notation, but a lot of people do that. But check out either using step input if you have a MIDI controller, or the computer keyboard input. And that allows you to put the pitch in just by hitting the actual note name. And set with the rhythmic value, and you could change the rhythmic values again. A question that we also had was someone had a MIDI part like this with some long notes in it. And what they were doing is coming over here, cutting the notes. So the question was about splitting like parts on a project window and having those automatically conform to notes that are on the actual, have those edits conform to the notes themselves. So, and this could kind of rely on a preference. So I'll just deactivate it here real quick before we look at it again. So let's say if I have this particular group of notes here, which is, let's say, 2 whole notes tied together, starting at measure 4, going to measure 6. And what was happening was, by default, the person would cut this and they wanted to move that over a measure or beat. And we see that it didn't actually affect the notes here. These notes still kind of start and continue on. And if we look at just this particular part, you realize that there's no data in there because these notes actually start there. So if we wanted to activate the preference, so we go to Cubase, to Preferences. At this point, you go to Editing, to MIDI. What you want to do is to activate split MIDI events. So now if I choose to come here, cut that particular note, we see that these notes have been split as well. And now I could just move this particular note. And now instead of it being 8 beats long, I have 2 groups of notes that are 4 beats long that have now been split as a result of the project level editing of the parts, and then the MIDI can be split to automatically follow it. So that's a good way of doing that. Someone else had asked a question. Let's say if we have a number of, let's say I'll just do some audio tracks here. And they wanted to be able to kind of nudge like an audio event. So let's say if I have this particular audio event, I'll just make it, and what they wanted to do is they figured that they could nudge in the timeline using the nudge panel here. And if you don't see the nudge panel in your particular project window, what you could do is just make sure you right click and that the nudge palette. So this would allow you to, move events, and I think you could use different keyboard shortcuts. On Mac, you could just command with the left or right arrows. It's probably control on Windows. An alter option allows you to kind of trim the endings of the event. So if you wanted to come here, but what they wanted to do was to nudge kind of vertically to take this event and move it downwards. And what you could do is there's not an assigned keyboard shortcut, but if you go to key commands and then under nudge, at this point you could assign key commands for down and up. So I just put it to option shift down. So now what I could do is just simply take this event and I could move it to different tracks just like that, in addition to being able to nudge or trim different events like that. So again, if you go to nudge vertically or horizontally apart, go to key commands, and under nudge, what you want to do is to just select and assign keyboard shortcuts for up and down. And then these events can be nudged vertically to different tracks just like that. Okay, so a question that was mailed in advance. I have found a way to conform a scale step input after I enter some notes, but I'm wondering if there's a way to input a series of notes in a step editor that allow my chord pattern and its associated scale no matter what notes I input. So let's take a look at this. So we'll go to like a MIDI part here. And what we want to do is to make sure that as we enter notes in, that our notes will automatically conform to a particular scale from how I'm reading it. And I think we can do this from the input transformer. So let's go ahead. So we'll set it up here to local. And what we want to do is to just say our type is equal to note. Okay, so what we do at the top is we define kind of what incoming data is there and then what we're going to do with this under the action target. So this is what's coming in, this is what we want to do to that note. So if I come here, we can say I want to go to value 1, and then under operation, we can say transpose to scale. So now let's say I wanted to make everything in C major. And as I hit notes chromatically here on, let's say I'm just going to hit the black keys on the keyboard. Now, one thing with the input transformer is to make sure that once you have this set up that you activate the module. Otherwise, it's not going to actually do anything. So we want to activate that module there. So now no matter what notes I put in, it's going to automatically transpose that to the key of C major. So on I have a Nectar controller here, and I'm just going to hit all the black keys as we do step input. So I'll just come here, and let's say this is our step input point. And let me just come here. I'll make that my step input point. All right, so we'll just kind of start in here. Now, as I hit only black keys, we can see that these will automatically be transposed so that I cannot play any note out of the key of C major. So if we see kind of like our black keys are indicated here in the MIDI key editor, none of the notes will fall, even though every single note that I hit was actually on a black key. So again, to set that up, what you want to do is just go to your input transformer, and you can set this for local if you wanted that, and that would be for that particular track, or for global. And then make sure that you have the module on. We want to say our MIDI notes. So we'll say filter target is type is equal to notes, and then value 1 for our action target, the operation transposed to scale, and then you could set your scale. You're not limited to just major or minor. There's a number of different scales that you could have set there. And then whatever notes you enter in, it's automatically going to be directly to that chosen scale. All right, just going to check the comment feed. All right. Okay, so we'll go through some more questions here. Thanks everyone for great questions and for patience. Okay, so it says, say I have a song that wasn't recorded with the click, and I don't want to use tempo detection because I think it wouldn't detect the tempo correctly. I'd like to record a MIDI track, tapping the tempo during the whole song on a keyboard or a controller device, and then transform the MIDI track into a tempo map. I was able to make a MIDI track with notes on each beat or each measure, but I didn't find the way to transform this into a tempo map correctly. I tried calculate tempo with MIDI or something like that, but it got weird results. How can I do this? So let's say I just wanted to, one is to definitely try the tempo detection because it works surprisingly well on the audio source. If you have a MIDI part, so let's say if I was just recording, and let's say I just wanted it to go here, and I just wanted to tap in some MIDI notes, so I'll just kind of play kind of randomly here with a click. Okay, so let me just... So let's say if I have just kind of this broken down and I just have some MIDI parts that are captured. You know, one of the things that you could do is there's a couple different ways. Again, I think if you actually tried the tempo detection stuff, you'd be kind of perhaps a bit surprised. You could go directly here to the beat calculator. You know, if you want to just do a quick tap tempo, and you could just kind of use your space bar and kind of tap that in. But, you know, so that's one way of kind of doing it. But if we have like a number of MIDI parts here that were tapped in, really all you have to do is select that MIDI event. The tempo detection works for both MIDI and audio. So if I go to my project and we say tempo detection and analyze that selected event, that will do the tempo detection of MIDI for you. Now, as it does the tempo detection, it's basically figuring out what the beat is. So you may, you know, want to just go directly here and make sure that you have your time signature set correctly. So you say, we're in 4/4 time. Now, as I did that, one of the things that it will do, and you can do this for both the audio and the MIDI, once I do from my project menu, the tempo detection, you know, it switches the tool here. So let's say if I just did my analysis of that particular MIDI event here. So I will... So say this is my tempo, and we'll come directly here to our tempo detection, analyze. So if you find that either the audio or MIDI isn't quite lined up as you want, what you could do is once you're in this tool, it takes you to the time warp video. And now what you could do is just do your slight changes here. And then you could kind of, you know, tweak it, and it will do an analysis of all the tempo events afterward just to make sure that everything was kind of lined up for you. So once you do a tempo detection, it puts you into the tool where if it's not, didn't catch something, that you could very easily just make an adjustment and tweak it, and it will do the analysis for you directly afterwards. But the tempo detection works for both MIDI and works for audio material as well. So give it a try. I think, you shouldn't be hesitant to try the tempo detection from audio. All right, so question about changing the order is a common question we get a lot. Changing the order of tracks in the mixer, people want to be able to drag, and I completely understand. But what you could do is just simply drag the events here. Hopefully we'll see that soon. It's another kind of common feature request that I passed on many times, and a lot of people find it not as frustrating if you're working on a single screen, where you could now just simply change the order of the mix console tracks from the project window, but unfortunately can't kind of drag from the mix console and have it carry over to the project window. All right, so we had a question about what the direct routing does. So let's just do a new project, and we'll take a look at that. Okay, so one of the things that people have in the mix console that often is missed is this concept of direct routing. So we can see this in kind of our full mix console view. So I will just kind of come here, and let's go to the racks and make sure that direct routing is activated. Now what direct routing will allow you to do is I'm going to add, let's say, 2 different group channel tracks. Okay. And what I could do now with my direct routing, once I go into my mix console, is I could take this one particular drum loop, and I'll just put that into a loop here just so we can take a look at it. Okay, and one kind of key thing that it's easy to miss is you see this little drop down menu here. What you want this to be is to choose direct routing summing mode. It's off by default, I believe, so just place a little check mark there. And now what we could do is, as we kind of play the project here, I could route this to 2 different destinations, or to multiple destinations. So often people would do this where now I could send this particular drum loop to 2 different buses. And what this would allow you to do is to kind of opens up the whole world of parallel processing for you. So if you wanted to put like a really heavy duty, if you want to do like parallel compression, so if you wanted to now just kind of come over here, let's put on, like, let's say just like maybe tube compressor. And we'll just find a quick preset here. And let's say if you wanted to now EQ this, so what you could do is, kind of do different processing on different sources. So I could EQ and run particular tracks through this particular processor. And then if I wanted to have kind of a clean setting here on this particular one, and we'll just kind of open both of these up so you could see them. So at this point, you could actually just see kind of both of your different destinations here. So at this point, you could just say this is going to be group 2. Let's look at group 1, and you could route to multiple destinations for parallel processing. So and you could actually automate the routing. So if you wanted parallel processing only in the chorus, you could do stuff like that as well. So that's what the direct routing allows you to do. All right, so we had a question that was submitted here today. So it says, hey, Greg, how do I time stretch all the drum tracks within an audio folder simultaneously? So if I drag an end marker to the left for one track, they all follow, speeding the tempo up for all the drums. So there's a couple different ways of doing something like this. So let me just jump to a different project. So if you have drums that are kind of recorded at a steady tempo, like this, what you could do is just kind of, place this. If you wanted to say, I want all my drums to go from here to here in time, I could select all my drums, which are in blue here. And then what you could do is, there's one is you could say sizing applies time stretch. So if you need to fit multiple tracks into that amount of space, now our drums are faster. But I think this is from another question that you had. What I like to do, and especially if you have material that is fluctuating in tempo, what you could do is just do the tempo detection. So I'll take, let's say, my overheads here, and then I'll do just a quick tempo detection from the project menu. Okay, this is already pretty stable. Let me see if I can find another quick project that doesn't have. Okay, so I have a jazz. Let me just. So let's say I'm going to open up a project that wasn't recorded to a click track. So if I put up my click track on, so no correlation there. So I'm just going to take my overheads here and do a tempo detection. So once we're here, we'll analyze. Okay, so now it's kind of figured out our tempo map here. I'm just going to move this to the top. And it's going to figure out and place our time signature. So it kind of does the tempo mapping by beat, but it doesn't assume necessarily that everything is in 4/4 time. So we're just going to come here and define where the downbeat is. I think there's some pickup notes. Okay, so go to probably right where this kick hits. All right. And what I want to do is just say this is where our 4/4 time starts. So we've done the tempo map, and kind of getting back to our earlier point, you can see it's pretty accurate. So most programs can do a good job of figuring out if there's one steady tempo for all of your projects. But what Cubase could do is something interesting. We're going to select all of the events. And what I want to do now is to just come here. And if you go to the audio menu to advanced, what I want to do now is, when we look at our tempo values here of our tempo changes, every single beat is fluctuating. So between like 131, 147, and that's fine, and it's pretty typical. But what I want to do is to embed the tempo changes of every single beat onto the audio files themselves. And I do this by going to the audio, to advanced, and we say set definition from tempo. So I could write it into the project or directly as metadata into the audio files themselves. So we'll hit OK, and it's now embedding this data into the project that I have chosen here. And once we see this little line here, that means that that metadata has been written in. So now I could just kind of take any tempo So if I want this to be, 123, and just kind of hit play at this point. Or if I want to speed up tempo, I could activate my tempo track here. And again, I'll just make this a little larger. Let me just set my scale here a little higher. And if I wanted to just kind of speed up that particular section, so you can see where the tempo is sped up. Or if I wanted to, again, just kind of take a particular section here within the tempo, I could say, okay, I want to select that, and I wanted to just kind of ramp up in speed. Then we'll go back right here to our original tempo. And if I wanted to kind of select this range of tempo, if I go to the right center edge at this point, I could just kind of tighten up the tempo, but still have some variations. Or if you wanted to loosen it up, we could do stuff like that, or just bring it all down proportionally or all up proportionally by going to the top center. And I know people like chop up each beat and do stuff like that. It's really not necessary. So I think this method would probably work better for you. So once again, if it's fluctuating in tempo, just kind of, do a tempo detection. And if all the files are kind of together musically, at that point, define where your downbeat is, go to advanced, set definition from tempo, and then you could just, freely adjust the tempo after the fact quite easily. All right, so we had a question. Is there any known issues with Wave's Q clone in Cubase 9.5? I can't get Q to capture to receive as an insert, or an audio channel doesn't even transmit unless a second insert is used. And then I think this is with the same question. I record the sweep elsewhere and import that into a track. Q capture works and communicates normally. I don't have Q clone, so I'm not sure why that would, be acting that way. But I'm not sure how to get it set up. Maybe if there's someone else on the Hangout that could comment on that, that would be helpful to to determine, but I don't have that plugin. But I think if it's kind of like a matching EQ, you may also want to check out the Voxengo Curve EQ. So if you go under EQ, and this comes with Cubase, and this would allow you to, if you put it into average, to kind of capture and let's say once you see kind of the lines settle down, click on take, and let's say if I did like some horrible EQ here just to radically transform it. So say and now once I'm kind of doing this, we can see that it's now made these changes, and we could do a take. And what this would allow us to do is to use the first one as a reference and apply to that one. So that may be a tool to investigate, but I don't have a copy of the Waves Q clone, but I'm not sure if that's even the same kind of type of functionality. I'm just kind of guessing by the name, but you may want to investigate with the Curve EQ, but maybe someone else who has it could check it out or answer. So I see a question. Hi, I EQ in Cubase. My project after reopened the same project, the EQ is flat. Thanks. I've never seen that happen before. So, every time, every project that I've done, I have, generally a good amount of EQ. So let's take a look at this project and we'll just... So let's say if I just wanted to come here, adjust EQ. So I'm not sure if this is, I'm assuming it's with the channel EQ, but let's say if I just, I'll just throw in some kind of random EQs and I will save this project. Okay, so we have those EQs set up. I'll go ahead and close this project and let's go ahead and open it again. And now we'll go to the mix console and all the EQs are preserved. So maybe if anyone else has that is running into that, if you wanted to email a project, I think you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.net. But I haven't come across that. Okay, so when does a mono track, so when becomes a mono track a stereo track in the channel routing via an insert or after the fader? So it's going to be after the fader. But so if you have a mono track, so let's say I want to go to my saxophone here, we're listening. So, you know, we have this, and then as we look at our mono track, we can see that this is going to a stereo effects. And I get this a lot for people that, you know, want to have your stereo effects, and, you know, they put an insert for reverbs or delays, and then it follows the channel configuration. So it'll be a, you know, mono delay or mono reverb, you know. But to me, it's just really easy. If I wanted to add a stereo delay, I could just right click, and then we'll say I just want to add an effects channel track and just add a delay. So if I just wanted to do a quick stereo delay here, turn that on. Then you can have your delay. So it's going to be post fader, or if you send it to a stereo group, it could then, you know, put effects on it. But you know, it's going to be, you know, after the fader. So when it's going to, or, you know, you know, it could be going, you know, I guess technically before the fader if it's going out to a bus. But I think the answer would be after the fader, and just run, you know, if you need to run stereo effects, run it as a, you know, as an effects channel, as a send, or run it as to a group and be able to do that. All right, so let's see. Question: how do I switch from drummer's view to audience's view in Groove Agent 4.2 using Simon Phillips drums? He's playing from drummer's view. So let's go ahead and load up a project and take a look at that. So, I mean, I have the Simon Phillips here on this, but I think we could kind of get the same. I'll just try some of the jazz drums. I usually use another computer for my demo. Sorry about that. But generally, like, you know, within Cubase, let's say if we go to the instrument, you could just go to the mixer output. And at this point, you know, we could see all of your different panning options here. So at this point, you know, you could go to your snare, hi-hat, and then, you know, if you wanted to, you could just simply adjust the panning directly here for each of the sources independently. So I would give that a try and see if that does work. I'm sorry I don't have the library, but I could check it out if you wanted to email me offline. But within Groove Agent 4.2, if you just go to, once the instrument's loaded up here, go to the instrument, and then go to the mixer, and then you could adjust the panning directly there for each of the sources. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to display the instruments in Mix Console but without the output channels? Okay, so let's go ahead and start a new project. So let's say I'll just hide my input channels here. So, all right, so I see my stereo out, and these are my outputs here. So let's say I add an instrument track of Retrolog. We'll just say I'll add that. Okay, so as I do that now, the instrument track has been added, and this will be our volume, so that everything is kind of consolidated. So when I go to click on the edit channel, we can see the audio channel characteristics there. Now it's going to be a little different with the MIDI track that's added. So let's say if I wanted to add a pad shop. All right, so now when I add a pad shop, it looks like we see so I see the pad shop here and the pad shop here. So this would be the MIDI volume, and this would be just a return. So if you wanted to, I think if we just go to filter, at this point you could say, let's just turn off our MIDI channel. So now you would only see the MIDI volume registered here. I'm just going to reread your question and make sure that is right. So you want to display the instruments in mix console but without the output channels. So you can see the instruments here. So I think what you want to do is just kind of filter out your different sources. So you could just say you wanted to filter MIDI channels. A lot of people want to do that and just deal with the outputs for the virtual instruments. So give that a try, and I think that'll do the trick for you. All right, so I think this question is from Taylor. If lanes can be converted to tracks, can tracks be converted to lanes? I think we need to turn it into like a directly into maybe a track version. So let's say if I have an audio track here, and I'll just do some fake recording. Okay, I'll just turn off my... So say I just do recording, all right, and then I want to come here and we'll say new version. Okay, we'll do a new version. So if I wanted to take these different versions to lanes, I think it's under project. We can now go to track versions and create lanes from versions. And now as we go to our lanes, we can see our different lanes kind of pop up there. So you may have to work it into or copy it into track versions, and then you could convert it into lanes as well. All right, so question, this kind of goes back to what we're doing a bit earlier. Is it possible to change the tempo WAV files, which is imported from another project? So I'll just go ahead and import a file from another project, and let's make my tempo 157 beats a minute. And we'll just import tracks from project. Okay, so I'll just select this project here. Okay, so if the original file is tempo stamped, you can, and you could determine if it has a tempo stamp a couple different ways. One is to just kind of come over here and if you go to the media, to the audio pool, at this point, you could say this track 4 is at 121 beats a minute. So, and then what you want to do is make sure that it has a tempo stamp and that you just place it into musical mode. So once something is in musical mode, that will automatically follow the tempo of your project. And you can put musical mode on directly here. So we play back our original tempo. And then as soon as I go here, I can just say musical mode. Then it's going to play back whatever file you want. So as you record audio into Cubase, it's going to automatically be tempo stamped. And once that tempo stamp is on it, all you have to do is to select the file and make sure that it's in musical mode in the other project, and then it's going to conform to the tempo that you have from that particular project inside of Cubase. Question, is there a way to take the manual pitch correction data from one voice, convert it to MIDI, use that MIDI data to feed the auto pitch corrector to apply to another voice? Let's see if we could do that. I haven't tried that, but we may be able to do it with the pitch correct plugin. So let me give it a try here. Just see if I have the project might be open. Yeah. Okay, so what I want to do is we'll take just this voice. There at the ground, not a sound, tell me. Okay, so we'll go to our Very Audio editor here and we'll convert this into MIDI. So we've done this, and now we'll extract MIDI with notes and static pitch bend data. And we'll put it onto a new MIDI track. So now what we've done is we've taken that vocal and applied it directly to this. And one of the things that we can have is, let's say, an audio track. I'm not sure if this will work. I'm kind of inclined to say no, but we'll give it a shot. Is on this track, I haven't played with this particular plugin. I don't know of a way to do it into Very Audio, but if I wanted to now, we'll take a look at our pitch correct plugin. So let's say if I wanted to come here to pitch shift, we could go to the pitch correct plugin, and this you could have external MIDI notes. I think you could basically just kind of play this, but I don't think it's going to give us an output. Oh, okay. So what we could do now is set the pitch correct, the output of this to the pitch correct of the plugin. on the other track, I've instantiated the pitch correct. You want to do external MIDI note, and we're going to take like this particular MIDI track here and feed this out to the MIDI input. I don't have kind of two different vocals that are kind of close to make it match, but you could definitely give that a try. And it's not the very audio, which is probably what you may want to do, but this may get you there very quickly with the external MIDI note and having that as your MIDI output destination for the track that was extracted directly from the original part in Very Audio. So that could speed up workflow. Okay, so a quick question on I missed the last hangout, but I have two questions. First, is there a soft clipper in Cubase? I think, and there could be different definitions of what soft clipper is, but I think if we go to your dynamics, yeah, so check out the soft clipper plugin under distortion. So you could just simply have that directly there. So look for it under distortion, or you could just search for particular plugins. And the second question was, can you change, save default EQ bands, i.e. band 1, be bell, or shelf? Let me take a look at that. So I assume that this would be on an audio source. So let's just come here really quick. And I want to say that perhaps if you... So let's say if I wanted to come here and I wanted this to be parametric 1. So I think if we just in the EQ save as the default preset, so let's just say, so let's say for some reason I wanted that as my default preset. Now this will probably mix up all my mixes now. So let's say if I just go to a new project. So I think, and there may be a way to just, I could delve a little more into that, but I think if you actually, you may have to, try new project again. Yeah, so if you actually make, you may have to make just a very, very subtle change on the EQ, but let's say if this may be saved independently, but let's try. All right, now add in our audio track. So it looks like if you come here, you can just simply on the EQ, just simply save as default preset. You may have to just add ever so slightly, like a little bit of EQ, but it looks like it kind of saved. So try just making sure that that is, just click there, save as default preset, and give that a shot. And I think that may do the trick for you. All right, so we had a comment on how to set up like a CD bus as a reference. So is it possible to have multiple? Maybe I'm getting okay. Your recommendations to set up a CD bus to reference your mix without any plugins. Okay, and we've done this a couple times in the Hangout, so we'll definitely do it again. So let's say I'll take this, and so sometimes doing references can be tricky to work on, because if you wanted to have like the project in your file, so if you have a CD, you may want to just import that audio CD and import that track. So let's say if we have and let's say in this one I have like a reference track, which is it's actually the mix down of it, but I'm going to just kind of change it up a bit here. So let's say I'm listening to this, I'm going to solo this particular channel. So now we're just hearing this, and let me apply some horrible EQ. And let's say this is our reference track that I have as a stereo audio file in all of my tracks here. So, and this is where we could set up the control room to kind of do kind of an alternate bus. So we want to go into your audio connections and then go to your control room. And then what we want to use is you want to add a Q mix. We don't see it listed here because I have 4 Q mixes currently. And what I'm going to do is to take this reference track, and then I'm not going to send it to any particular bus. So it's going to go to no bus, and under Q sends. And if you don't see Q sends, right click in this column so you see the Q sends. And what we want to do now is to set this to 0 dB. So now when I'm looking at this, I could play back my project here. And if I go to QMix 4, if I did it correctly, oh, okay, we'll just unmute that. This is my reference. And the reason why we want to do this is if you have effects on your master bus or EQ, so let's say I have like frequency EQ, at this point, it's gonna, any audio file that you import is gonna go through those particular buses. So if I take this and I start EQing, there's no difference because it's not going through the master bus, but it's going through the Q mix. So I could listen to my mix versus the reference track. And the reference track at this point isn't getting processed through the master effects chain. So a lot of people take a master track and then run it through different EQs and limiters and maximizers, and then you're really kind of cheating yourself because it's not an accurate representation. So to have a reference track set up, what you want to do is to import the reference track. In the routing, you want to first make sure that you have under your audio connections in the studio, in the control room, that you have a bus, like Q mix set up. So here I just ran it through like my sax Q mix. At that point, take your reference track, send the output to no bus. Make sure by right-clicking that you have your Q-Sends turned on, enabled. Enable the Q-Send. And now you can switch back and forth between that Q-Send as the reference and your mix. And see where you're at for loudness, what you're doing for, tonal characteristics. So all that can be done pretty easily using that. It's a great kind of alternate function of the control room for that's great for doing reference mixes. So it's kind of harder to actually do correctly than a lot of people, come to realize to make it, accomplish the goals that you want. All right, question next is how can we use an external compressor with the UR44? So the UR44 is the Steinberg interface, and this has 6 inputs and 4 outputs. So what we could do now is, and again, we will go to our studio menu to audio connections, or you can hit the F4 key. And at this point, we could set up your external effects. So let's say, hey, I went out and bought a Pultec or an 1176. So now what I want to do is to, within my connections, I want to physically connect it into my audio interface. So let's say I wanted to go to in and out. So I want it to go, let's say mono. So we're going to say input 2 or input 3. And then let's say I want it to be, or output 3, and I want it to be input 3. So right now I've connected the out of my audio interface to the input of the compressor, the output of the compressor to input 3. And now as we come here, what we're going to do is just go to, so we've connected that to our audio interface. So you're going to need an audio interface, and UR44 works for this very well. And then under our plugins, you'll see external plugins. So say you have your 1176. Now, the interesting thing is, especially with like older reverb units, sometimes they could have some pretty significant latency issues. And sometimes to have this compensated for, there's this little ping here. So if you click on that channel, that will actually kind of ping the latency and measure the latency of that particular signal path. So once you ping it, at that point, you could say, all right, that's pinged. And now you could just run it as a normal plugin, and the audio would get routed directly out of your audio interface into the 1176 or whatever compressor you want. And at that point, the output of the 1176 is going to the input of your audio interface, and you could just access and use your external hardware, compressors, EQs, effects, very easily using the external processing. So just make sure you go to hit the F4 key, go to, in previous versions, it was called VST connections. Now it's under the studio menu to audio connections, and just click on the external effects, and then you could have access to all of your I/O options right there. So we'll look at the next question. I'm just going to check, make sure everything is going well with the Hangout. All right. So I know we have a lot of questions coming in. So I hope everyone's learning a couple tips and tricks. Okay, so question, is there a solution to coordinate a Windows system with an iPad via MIDI timecode? So it really depends. Some interfaces for the iPad can accept MIDI timecode. I'm not sure. I'm not even sure if our Cubase app will sync to MIDI timecode. But it really depends on the app itself being able to synchronize to MIDI timecode. So if And I could check if you wanted to email me afterward at clubcubase@steinberg.net. I'd be kind of willing to kind of see if there's the possibility that it syncs to MIDI timecode, but it's really what you do, is make sure that that device is set up to receive MIDI timecode, and you could do the sync setup from the transport menu. And at this point, we could just say you wanted to, take MIDI timecode, and at this point, you wanted to send it out to whatever MIDI interface is going to be connected. There may be like a virtual MIDI timecode. So that could be possible. But you have to make sure that your app itself on the iPad is responding to MIDI timecode. Okay, so we say, okay, so I see a question. To explain my question, a vocal track mono recording with Waves plugin, there remains a problem that channel balance left-right is wrong when plugin is mono to stereo. Probably, and this could go back again to the point we made earlier, where if you have a mono source and you want, a particular plugin, to be in stereo, just, it's really easy, and I see people have a tendency to want to do everything as inserts, and I think some programs may lend people to that way, but just select a particular track and just if you're running into problems with that, just click on add effects channel track. So you could have 8 per channel. They don't have to be 8 total that you can access. So you can have 8 independent effects ends in this channel versus 8 independent effects on the next channel if you wanted to, and just make sure that you have your stereo effects that way. And that way you could also do some clever things, like once we're in this particular track, that you could also adjust panning independently for each of your stereo effects. So you have one stereo effect that could be panned independently across multiple sources. So one stereo delay or one stereo reverb, you could pan this way for one channel, this way for another, or that way for yet another channel. So, if there's a reason that you need it to be running as an insert, let me know. But, it's really easy just to run your stereo as sends, kind of like a traditional console. All right, is it possible to export all the tracks in the project at the same time to a single file? And I think this was, the 2 separate files. So really all you have to do if you wanted to do kind of a batch export of all these different tracks is to just, come directly here to the export audio mixdown, and you want to make sure that the channel batch export is turned on. And here, like in this project, we could just say I want my output channels, I want my group channels, my effects channels, my VST instruments, my audio channels. And what that would do is it would make kind of equal length audio files that could be exported, and then they could be easily imported into just about any other program or even a physical hardware hard disk recorder playback system. So if you wanted to take all these files and, export them at one time, just again, file menu to export audio mixdown. And at this point, make sure that you have the channel batch export and just kind of click here to turn on all the elements that you do want exported at one time. right. So I see a question. Is there any possibility for Cubase artist users to get rid of the wave and MIDI visuals in the automation? It's probably in the automation lane. It's a matter of visibility. I switched to Cubase Pro, but others still have this problem. I don't know. I think it's one of the limitations of Cubase artist, kind of, but if you're not familiar with this, if you wanted to look at automation, and a lot of people prefer that, and a lot of people, and if we have automation here, some people, as they're kind of drawing in automation, realize that as they work with this, that what they want to do is to actually not reference the waveform on top, especially if you have multiple lanes of automation, but see the automation itself. So if you hit F6 and go to the automation panel, you can just, what you could do is to show data on tracks. And once that is checked, you'll see the waveform here. So you can actually kind of edit the waveform. Within Cubase Artist, there isn't an automation panel because the automation is kind of limited compared to the Pro version. So at this point, I don't know of a way to turn that on or off as a preference in Artist. I could try to dig around a little more. I usually kind of work in the Pro version more myself, but it doesn't mean that it's not there. But I think I've looked before for different preferences and didn't find it in the Artist version. All right, so we have lots of great questions have come in. So let me scroll back and try to catch up. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Is everyone learning a couple tips and tricks? Okay. Okay, so we have a question just on how to synchronize MIDI and waves together. I'm not sure if this is more like kind of a match quantize type of thing. Let me see. I think we may have a way to show that. Let me just see if I can find it. Sorry. See, this is a project I was thinking of. So I get this question a lot of kind of like how to, and I'm not sure, obviously you could have MIDI and audio kind of simultaneously in the project window, but this could be maybe synchronizing the feel of drum loops. Let me just open up the R project here. Okay, so let me just find a quick drum loop, and I think I had one on here. Okay. Okay, so we had a question. I think this might be kind of synchronizing like MIDI drums to audio. So we'll show you how to do kind of match quantizing. So let's say I have two different drum loops kind of going on here. So let me just drag that out and we'll glue it together here. So let's say these two aren't quite lining up musically, and we want to kind of synchronize or apply the feel of one part to another. So what we could do is, if I wanted to we'll start with the drums to MIDI. So if I wanted to apply the feel of this drum loop to this MIDI loop, and again, if we listen to it, not quite so happy. So what I'm going to do is and if we go to, we could see kind of our quantize panel, and you could have different presets here. And what's kind of interesting about this is I could double click to go into my sample editor, and I want to go to hit points, and I want to kind of adjust probably a threshold on the lower side. And then what I want to do is click on create groove. And what this has done is this has copied this particular groove of the drums into as a preset, a quantized preset. So now what I'm going to do is to just kind of click on my MIDI event. If we watch our MIDI events here, and then with this quantized preset active, hit the letter Q. And now my MIDI drums have been quantized to the audio drums. And we'll go ahead and just kind of mute each source. Now, if I wanted to do the opposite, so I'll undo those changes. What I'm going to do is to take this particular MIDI part and drag it to my audio event. Then what I need to do is at these particular sample points, what I want to do is to create slices. And now, since this is our quantized preset, we'll have the audio. If we watch the audio slices here, I'll hit Q, and now the audio has now been lined up to the MIDI. So that way you could take kind of, quantize MIDI to audio, audio to MIDI, audio to another audio, or MIDI to another MIDI part. So hopefully that answers the question. That's what you mean about synchronizing MIDI and wave together. All right. I saw someone asked how I was doing. I'm doing great. It's good to be on a hangout. It's been kind of a busy month of travel, so it's nice to have some time to do a hangout. All right, so we see Stanley from Poolsville, Maryland. Sorry, I'm just kind of going through comments now, going through the comments field. Thanks, everyone, for the great questions. So question, okay, so I see a question. I have Elements 9.5 in one of my recent projects. I'm able to use fine tune, but other projects that feature doesn't show up. How do I get it to show up? So, and I think this might be related to, so it's just, I'll just take an audio file, just a quick loop here. right. So say I want to take just this little MIDI loop here, and I'll just switch my sizing here. Let me just. And let me just mute drums. So we'll just kind of. So it could be that you may not see the fine tune active. It could be contingent upon something being selected. So what you could do here is kind of transpose. So if you wanted to transpose the audio down several cents, but also you could do fine tune. So this would be semitones. So, but as you can see, if you don't have anything selected, it doesn't show up. So no object is selected. So if you don't see the fine tune visible, make sure, one, that the fine tuning, and I hope this is the fine tune that you're talking about, but it's not going to show up for MIDI data. It's going to show up for audio parts. So make sure that you have an audio part and that the part is selected. And then I think you should see the fine tune. So maybe that other projects you just have MIDI, but you could do, different pitch shifting if you needed to in MIDI. But so give that a try, and it's for Country T. All right, we have Detroit, Michigan checked in. All right, so more people from Sweden. See comments in German. Unfortunately, I work for a German company, but I can't read German. So if there's a question you want to know, just let me, if someone could translate. If it's a question, if it's a comment, that's fine. All right, so we have a question. Is there an easy way to separate the drums from Alesis DM Pro into separate tracks in Cubase Elements 9.5? So let's say if we have drums, what we could do, I'm just going to go ahead and we'll add a MIDI track. So let's say we have our drums here. I'm going to switch to my drum editor. So let's say and I just kind of defaults to the, to like a general MIDI map. So let's say we have bass, drum, and snare. I'll just move these down. Let's say the snare. And a hand clap or two, and let's put in some hi-hat, and maybe a couple times. All right, so if I wanted to take this particular MIDI event, and if you have it set as a drum map, you could kind of see it kind of listed as the drum grid icons here. And I wanted to split this. I'm pretty sure this is in Cubase Elements 9.5. But if you go to MIDI to dissolve part, and what you want to do is choose separate pitches, and you could optimize the display. It's not. So I would probably leave those two open. And now at this point, your kick, snare, hi-hat, bass drum will automatically be all broken down into separate MIDI tracks for you. So once again, once you have that done, just go to MIDI to dissolve part, and from dissolve part, probably just separate pitches and choose to optimize display. I see a question, Cubase 10 Pro with lots of question marks. So it hasn't been announced yet, but I'm sure that people are working on stuff. Okay, so a question from Jeremy. It's probably in the manual, but I find it colorizing tracks, groups of tracks, while holding down Shift is trickier than is used to be in previous versions. So let's just do like a new project here. And I'll just add, let's say, 24 tracks. All right, so here I kind of, there's preferences for kind of auto colorizing tracks that a lot of people miss. So if you get to your Cubase preferences, and at this point we could just say and it might be just find the. So here you can see the kind of the auto color mode where you could automatically increment colors, etc. But to me, if I wanted to color multiple tracks, I would select it. If I wanted these all to be the same color, go to the color tool and just color like that. So if I want all my drums that color, I want keyboards green, I want guitars to be, bluish. So I think that's, and I kind of missed that myself for years, and I complained. It's like, why doesn't this work? Because I would want to hold down the shift key here and kind of set all my colors, and that would kind of do it one at a time. But if you just, say I want to select all these and I want them to be this color, that just kind of using that color tool makes it really fast. So give that a try and see if that makes sense, where you could leave me a comment, Jeremy, if that doesn't make any sense. But I think it's pretty straightforward, but I missed it for a number of years personally. So we have a question. Is there an advantage to having a sidechain input on Howling in 6 as opposed to direct input in DAW mode? That's often used primarily just for, being able to take like an entire bus, or, if you have multiple synth sounds that you're kind of stacking to doing your own sampling, to be able to have access to, all those single sources just for kind of routing is kind of where the sidechain can come in handy for if you're doing your own kind of sampling. All right, so we have Vinny in Orlando who's plugging his album. They did all in Cubase. Congratulations on finishing your record. Okay, so seeing just another some more discussion. I'm just reading on about the Alesis DM Pro, I think, with the split MIDI notes that we just showed. Yeah, so I think if you just do that split MIDI notes, the separate pitches, that will do the trick for you. All right, so we have someone from Switzerland that checked in. Just seeing a comment, if I'm correct, that does not work with the edit tools. They like say parabola, right? And this from uh, a Lauren tube. Maybe if you could, this may be in reference to a previous discussion point. But if you want to clarify for me in the comments, I'll look for it later as I scroll down. Yes, Sub 403 makes a great point. He says, make sure you hit the like button to show appreciation. You don't have to show it to me, but to Steinberg. I'm always glad to help out. I'm seeing a comment that I'm out of focus. You may want to just refresh your browser. Usually, if the screen is a little fuzzy, it's just kind of, it could be just like transmission speed of the internet connection on the receiving end, but sometimes refreshing the browser can help. Okay, I see that the comment from Oloran Tube. The comment is, what I mean is that the MIDI input transformer only works with external inputs from actual MIDI hardware ports and does not constrain Cubase internal edit tools. Or am I mistaken? Probably what you could do is if you wanted to take a particular track, you could take that track and send it out to, there's different software. Like on Mac, there's a software called IAC Bus. And I think this was kind of getting back to our previous discussion of the input transformer. And what we did was that's when we did the scale correction a bit earlier. So if I wanted to add, let's say, 2 MIDI tracks here. So you could perhaps play around with sending something out to like an IAC bus. On the Mac, you have the IAC bus. And on Windows, you get something like, Loop MIDI or Loopback, I think is one that I use. And that could send, information from one track, out to another track. And then you could set the input to like the IAC bus. So data from this track could be looped back to the input of a particular track. So I think if you try a loopback software, you could take the input from one track and feed it to others. So experiment. If you just do a search for, the Mac, it's part of the part of Core MIDI. But there's a number of options on Windows. But then you could take that track and kind of reroute it internally back into the program. So is there a way to toggle between the key and drum editor window? Thanks in advance. So there's a couple, we could do it. So let's say if I have some MIDI data here. And this is where, all right, so I'm going to switch this. Sometimes when I have my IAC bus as an input, nothing's getting sent out. Causes all sorts of fun in my system. So I probably shouldn't have done that. Let's see if we can get it to recover. If not, I may just have to reboot here. I did internal MIDI routing of itself. So I'm going to just really quickly reboot and probably be faster here real quick. Bear with me a second. Sorry about that. Okay, so we have, is there a way to toggle between the key and drum editor in the editor window? So I'm not sure if that's in the bottom But we'll go ahead and take a quick look at it here. Just give me a second and reboot it. Sometimes if you don't have data going through your IAC bus on Mac, it gets a little weird. All right, so I'll just go ahead and add an instrument track. Okay, so now at this point I want to. So, you could just simply go between key editor, drum editor here. There's also, the ability to assign the key commands. So if you wanted to just come here, you could go to File to Key Commands. So generally, if so at this point, you could just go to the editors and you could assign key commands. And one thing that a lot of people don't know, like, you by default, and it's a preference, like, if you just come here, you could have this automatically, and we'll show the preference here. So if I always wanted to go to an in-place editor, I could just now come right here, double click, and let's say if I don't have the lower zone active, that it would go to like an in-place editor, or I could choose to have it go directly if I'm more of a notation guy. I could just come here and double click, and that part would go to notation. If it's assigned a drum map, by default, when you double click, it'll go to the drum editor. But so depending on the type of track, you can set up which editor opens, and if you to toggle back and forth, you may want to just simply, so you could just simply have that set there. You can switch the editors, but you could also just assign key commands under editors to specifically open drum editor or drum editor in the lower zone or drum editor in the window. So, you could just open up different windows to launch different editors as you want. Okay, so we had a question. Would you explain how to get specific folders containing samples into the media bay on the right side of the screen? All right, and this is from Forfeit. I hope I'm saying that correctly. So media bay, if you want to come here, we could say, you could look at your media bay window. So one of the things that's always helpful is, if you go to the lower left-hand corner just to activate the file browser. And let's say I have some particular presets or particular sounds that I wanted. So let's say under my user account, let's say I want to go to documents. And at this point, I wanted to go to let's say this particular folder. Now, if I wanted this folder to be available to be accessed on the right-hand side, kind of as a favorite. So all I had to do is I'm going to take this Devin's Jazz folder, and what we could do is just kind of click here to add favorite. So again, make sure that you have the file browser open, navigate to the folder, and click here to add favorite. You can rename it so it doesn't have to be the same name as the folder. Hit OK. And now you could actually just kind of come directly here on the right hand side. So let's say if we go to Your media, you could say, let's go to favorites, and then Devin's Jazz, and then you could see all of your files directly right there. So you could just go to, again, favorites here, and you can say, okay, let's just go to that folder, and then you could just navigate quite easily. So that way, again, just go to your media bay, go directly to, make sure the file browser is open, navigate to the file in the directory tree, and it'll probably help if you check it so that media bay knows to look in that particular folder. Click on the add favorites icon, and then you could just simply kind of jump around. So you can see your favorites here. So if you say, okay, I just want to go here to that favorites, I want to go to Devin's Jazz I just created, and then you're all set. Okay, so see a question. I bought Cubase 9.5 last week. Can't open my external samples that I have on my desktop from the right zone. I find it files, but can't open the file with the waves and listen to samples. Any suggestions? You find the files, but when you kind of come, so, once we've defined the folders in the media bay, so let's say if I just jump here, and let me just find like one particular folder. So let's say, and we see it on the right hand side, and I can see my different loops. So let's say I wanted to go through different drum loops, and let's say I don't hear the drum loop, so I probably, after the restart, just want to reset. What you want to make sure is, if you're running Cubase Pro, is that you actually have your control room set up. So you want the outputs to be defined, but probably not connected. And you want the control room to be connected. So you want the outputs defined. And now when you click on the different drum loops here, you can navigate all of your drum loops and all your sounds. So if you want to go up, you could just simply navigate just like that. So if you see the files, that probably means that you went into the media bay and you said, okay, I want to look at my desktop, and you could look at, different audio files there. But if it's the fact that you can't, as you scroll, you can't audition the loops, just make sure that you go to your studio, to audio connections, that your output is defined but selected as not connected. Go to the control room, and then you'll set up monitor 1. I've just renamed that to Yamaha HS7s, and then I want to just simply define that as my monitoring path. And then you should be all set. Then you should be able to audition and hear all of your sounds. I see someone else made kind of the same comment right over. So I see a question: is Cubase ever going to have polyphonic vari audio? I'm sure there's people that are working on it. We're still, every time I've heard kind of the polyphonic tuning, it's always been a little odd sounding to me personally. But I'm sure it's obviously a feature that's been requested. So. All right, so some more discussion about the drums that we discussed about splitting the drums. So just going through those. All right, so we had a question. Is it possible to offset the ruler track set as time code to the right? For example, time 00 actually starts at bar 3. So let's say if we go to bar 3 here, and I think there's a couple of ways of approaching this. And I'm just blanking on it right now. Let me just... Let's see, it's one of these settings that gets moved a bit. That's maybe under project. Oh, set time code at cursor. So if you wanted to, you could just say this is... Okay, so now what we do is just kind of come here, and I'm just going to reread the question here. So let's say, so is it possible to offset the ruler tracks as time code to the right? For example, time 000 actually starts at bar 3. So now, so what I did is just from the edit menu to set time code at cursor, and now I'll just add a ruler track. And we'll switch this to time code. And we'll see that time code is 0000 right there. If we switch this to time code, that now we have negative time. And from here we have right at bar 3, our bars and beats, there, your time code there. So I think that does a trick for you. If not, let me know. Okay, so we had a question, why can't I apply smoothing to the tempo track? So let's just quickly add a tempo track. So it may not be the term smoothing, but let's say if we had our tempo track active, and let me just... So let's say this is our tempo track and we wanted to kind of smooth that out. So, you know, maybe this isn't your definition of smoothing, but I think if I wanted to, you know, just select a range here, if you go to the center edge on the right-hand side, that you can kind of just, that seems to make it smoother, but maybe you're thinking of something else, but you could easily expand or kind of smoothen that out. And if you wanted to tilt, you could do stuff like that as well, or bring up the events proportionally but still have the same changes like that. So if that's not smoothing, just kind of let me know, and maybe there's another approach. And I'm seeing a comment, someone thought they could do it and says sometimes it's grayed out. Make sure that you have like tempo events selected with the object selection tool. So otherwise it may not kind of do that for you. Okay, just going through questions again. Thanks everyone for wonderful questions. I think it's great that everyone's able, hope everyone's learning a couple tips and tricks. Okay, so we have a question. When stretching an audio clip, moving the points inside the clip is easy, but how to move the first or last point end of the clip further to make the audio event longer? All right, so let's just find a loop here real quick. Okay, so, if you wanted to, there's a couple ways of doing this. So if you go into the sample editor, so let's say we'll just listen to it. And let me just turn off the tempo track here. So as you hear that was automatically kind of following. Okay, so if I wanted to make one of those last a little bit longer, one of the cool things is you could go directly into, and I'll go to audio warp tab. So if I wanted to just kind of take, this particular, you could go into like free warp, and then if you wanted to just stretch that one out or tighten it up, so now if you want to listen to it, so at this point you could just kind of say, okay, I just want to come here and let's tighten that one. Or if you wanted to elongate it. So play around with like the free warp mode. So if you go directly to audio warp and then just kind of go to free warp, and then you're able to kind of just take one particular element and stretch it out. So hopefully that helps and does a trick for you. All right, so we had some from Brazil check in. Claudio, thanks for joining the hangout. So question, when recording MIDI guitar, can you apply a separate sound per note via each MIDI channel? Yes, and you could do that. So let's say if we have, I'll just do a new project here. So now when I wanted to come here, let's say I wanted to add an instrument track, and let's just add something like from Hallian Sonic SE. And now at this point, let's say if I had different sounds on each string. So I had 6 different MIDI sources. All right, so this is kind of an old Cubase trick that, for MIDI guitar players have been very fond of. Whereas most programs deal with one particular MIDI channel, but if you've input it from a controller such as a MIDI guitar, which can transmit 6 different MIDI channels. So you can see channels 1 through 16 here. But if you wanted this one particular track to have MIDI events on multiple channels, just select any and then record the data, and then that could automatically be routed to each MIDI channel that's recorded directly in there, can automatically be played back through, six, six different sound sources here. So one track can handle multiple MIDI tracks. If afterwards, if we had and sometimes we see this with MIDI files, like ironically type 0 MIDI file, there's type 0 and type 1 standard MIDI files. Type 0 all comes in one track, and that one track is generally going to be outputting multiple MIDI files. So if you wanted to go to any, if you then afterwards wanted to split each of the MIDI channels to their own separate and distinct tracks, just like we did with the drums earlier, if we go to, let me just create some notes here. So if you go to MIDI to dissolve part, I don't have the right data, let me just. And then what you could do is to separate, you'll see this option here, it doesn't see multiple MIDI channels, but you could separate the MIDI channels at that point. Then you would see MIDI channel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So once again, to deal with a MIDI controller, such as a MIDI guitar that's transmitting on multiple MIDI channels, try putting your track into channel any, and that should help. All right, so we had a question. I'm seeing kind of a little confirmation on what the Q clone is. That it's used to analyze response curves of various internal and external processors, not the same as curve or the former free filter. You may want to check with Waves on that, Alexander. I could see if I could do some research on it if you wanted to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.net. All right, so we had a question, what can be the easiest way to set up Cubase for a live gig to change tunes, keyboard split, creating multiple channels and assigning specific voices? Do we have something like a Korg set list? What I know a lot of people do is, set up, let's say if we come here, and this is all of my MIDI items set up here. There's kind of two different approaches that people take. If you're performing everything live, I know a lot of people that just have every one of their keyboard split set up, and they have the logical editor set up and the input transformer set up to kind of do this. But you could just kind of come here and take each of the different songs here and place it into a folder. So let's say I wanted to duplicate that particular folder, and we'll duplicate again. So I'll just come right over here. And then what they have set up is, let's say song 1, song 2, song 3. And then what they do is they just kind of use, their arrow key, and then you could have it a preference set up so that, I think this is by default, so maybe under editing project and mix console, where you could enable record on selected track. So like at this point, Let me just see if there's a better preference for this. So what I know a lot of people do is just have everything kind of set up and then they just go, to the next song, and each song here can be kind of just laid out. And then all you have to do is just to, record enable the folder, and then you could send MIDI, all your MIDI patches for song 1, all your MIDI patches for song 2, all your MIDI stuff for song 3. And if it's set up where it's actually playing sequence tracks back or samples, you could just kind of have it arranged here in a timeline and have a marker track to navigate and record enable all of your tracks. So a lot of people will set it up to do that quite easily. Okay, so I see question, Greg, my Zoom settings never come up correctly when I reload a project. Example, I center my project window where the whole song is on the screen. When I save, is there a specific setting for this? Thanks. I think that the Zoom levels may be global. So let's say here, if I save this particular project, there's certain aspects of the program that are kind of more global versus project. So let's say if I save this, and let me open up in our project. So here we see roughly 15 bars. If I activate this project, we'll see if we see about 15 bars. Let's go back to, let's close that one. All right, so I'm just going to reread the question here. All right, so I center my project where the whole song is on the screen, and when I save, is there a specific setting for this? So let's see what this does. So it looks like it kind of saved in the same area. Now, there may be one preference now I'm thinking about it. Just see if I can find this preference quickly. I'll see if I can find this quickly. If not, I'll move on. But I want to say that I came across a preference that did something kind of like this. Maybe it's, let me just check. Maybe it's under project. All right. So I'm not finding that particular preference or setting, but I'll see if it comes back to me. But if you want to email me afterwards at clubcubase@steinberg.net. But I seem to remember something that's kind of triggering my mind with that. Okay. So we have, how do we reset pads in Groove Agent 4 so there are no duplicate notes on pads? So let's go ahead and open up Groove Agent 4. Okay, so let me just see if we can. Okay, so I think if you will just take, so let's say if I come here and I've changed this particular, so I think if you right click and just, if you just right click on the pads and choose to reset all pads, that will allow you to do it. So if I come here, let's, yeah, so try within Groove Agent 4 to select all the pads and then just to reset all pads. I think that will take it to the default factory mode of the naming. Okay, so I had a question. My audio inputs and outputs control room information on the top are disappearing or are disappearing. I tried layout, but not working. Please help. So let's take a look at our VST connections window here, or audio connections. So I'm just going to reread the question again. So is it, and for, I think it's from Pico, are you not seeing these tabs here? Maybe if you could answer that question, I'll see if I could get to it later. But just in the VST connections, you said you can't see the inputs, outputs in the control room. So is it these tabs that you're not seeing? So maybe if you could answer that, we could pick up your question a little bit later in the Hangout. So we had a question. This is a lot of info. I missed most of this live feed. Are you going to be doing more of these? And if so, when? I think we're going to be doing, we usually try to do 2 a month depending upon my travel schedule. So September, I've been traveling quite a bit. This is my first week at home. But usually we do 2 a month. I think we're going to do one maybe October 8th or October 9th would probably be the next one. But if you subscribe to the channel, and also check out like the Facebook page, they're announced there. But if you subscribe to the channel, you should get a little notification from YouTube that there's a Hangout coming. But you know, those are, and you could always watch these offline as well. Okay, so let's go through some more questions. Yeah, and other people are mentioning, indicating it's recorded. So, all right, so we have someone checking in from Denmark. That's great. So question, can we edit the tempo stamp if it's wrong in the pool? So, yeah, so if we record, let's say, a quick audio file here. And we see our tempo is at 120. And I stop, and let's go into the pool. So we'll go to our pool window. And we can see 120, so you could just type in 130. And that's all you have to do. So then you could just kind of have that tempo be the new tempo. So it's quite easy to do. So once again, go into the pool, select file. If you go into the pool window, and now you could set the new tempo stamp, the new tempo directly there. So apparently one of the songs I use for Sub 403 makes him cringe, so I'm not sure which one, but if you want to give me a song for demos, I'd be happy to use it. So so question is 9.5.4 out yet? I think the latest released version is 9.5.3, but I'm sure that, you know, we may see some stuff coming out soon. So we have a question, any news on Cubase 10? I'm sure that people are working on it, and it'll be out when it's done. So, and I'm sure when it's out, we'll have a nice big hangout for it. All right, so we have a question. I have an audio track, but I want to create a chord track from it, but it will not do it. I have done a right click and then went to chord track, then create chord and nothing. The chord track, kind of the make chords functionality that works only with MIDI at this point. So it doesn't do kind of audio analysis just because it hasn't been proven reliable yet. So the kind of that functionality is going to be done directly from MIDI only and not derived from an audio track. Okay, so we have a question from Patrick. Hi, Greg. How do you save a project with not real title name to a new with the right label, name of the song, and get all the audio files moved to the new subfolder? Probably the easiest way to do this is if you kind of just have a particular folder here. just go to your file menu, and then what you want to do is to you'll see save new version, but probably what you want to do is to choose backup project. And what that's going to allow you to do is now we define a new folder. And then all of the files will be saved in there. So you could type in a new project name. You could keep the current project out open. There's options to minimize audio files. So if you're at the, if let's say you had a 20-minute recording, but you used 30 seconds of it, that it would only copy those 30 seconds over. You could make direct offline processes permanent. You could remove unused files. So if you don't want to back up files that you didn't use, and you could choose to not back up the video. So once again, just kind of come over here to file to backup project, and that would allow you to save, and it will physically copy all the folders over directly to a new independent file. Will Cubase be almost as powerful as Cubase in the near future? Obviously, the capabilities of what you could do on an iPad, especially with the operating system, and the amount of RAM that you could have is limited compared to while they've gotten significantly faster over the years, so have the PCs and Macs. So I think it'll be a while before the tablets have the same functionality and capability of kind of power use that a computer does. For some people, but it really depends on what your workflow is. So some people can do everything in their iPad and they're so happy. Some people hit immediate walls with lack of processing power and capabilities. But we try to allow you to have the most out of different, the best capabilities in the DAW in Cubase or Cubase, depending what device you're running it on. So. So just seeing a comment from Yusuf says, thanks for all the information, guys, but what is the proper website to find this guy so I can watch them into stuff? So if you want to watch a lot of videos I've done, I'm not sure if you're referring to me, what you could do is just go to youtube.com/Cubase, and I have videos on Wavelab and instruments, and we'll have some new Ondo ones coming as well. Or you could also watch the Cubase Club Cubase Google Hangouts. There's a lot of information there. All right, so I'm just reading a question. Can you show us how to properly use the cloning EQ for our songs from different sources? Okay, the cloning EQ. Okay, so I understand. Sorry, it's sometimes hard to not make problems and typos. So all right, so let's say if we wanted to set up a cloning EQ. So really all you have to do is, and we kind of showed this a little bit earlier. I don't have two different sources, but I'll give you kind of a sense of what you could do. So I'm just going to put this on like the master bus. So what we have is kind of like what we call curve EQ. You want to put the mode to average. And then as we play back audio, what we're going to do And you'll see kind of the frequencies kind of settle in. We'll wait for the drums to kind of kick in. And then you'll see this static and match. And once that's kind of settled in, click on take. So let's say if I wanted to now do like a pretty radical EQ change here. So we'll see our high frequencies kind of adjust here. And then we'll click on take again. So if I wanted to use the first one as a reference and apply it to that, we can now say match spectrum. So that's kind of the concept. So you can just simply use one as a reference, and then you could use the other one, as and that you want to apply to, and then click on match your frequency spectrum. So I don't have like files set up in Cubase. I usually kind of do it in Wavelab, but that'll get you through kind of the mechanics of the curve EQ. So. Okay, so we had a question. Can you explain insert velocities and how they are used with shortcuts, please? All right. So I'll just add a MIDI track. So when you go to insert particular notes in a MIDI editor, we'll see this little icon right here where you can see insert velocity. So when I just kind of drop a note in, it's going to drop it in at a velocity of 100. And you have kind of different settings. So if I want it to be 90, 70, or if I wanted to be 50, or the next note I want to be 120. Now you can kind of set this up for 5 different values that you want. You could have different presets. Now, when we go to your key commands, so you'll have your 5 different levels of insert velocity. So let's say I just want this to be, we'll see if command option 1, I'll do for this one, we'll just do command option 2. Command option 3. So now that I've assigned those, we'll see when I hit command option 1, 2, 3, that's going to switch between those different velocity values. So you could just kind of enter in notes, hit the keyboard shortcut, and switch between 5 different velocity layers so that you could don't just input, like every note doesn't have to be a velocity value of 100. So you could set keyboard shortcuts to do that, and that's kind of goes back to Cubase from Atari days, where you have those options to do. So once again, you could have 5 different levels of velocity. So when you kind of put a note in or draw a note in, you could do that and go to the key commands, and then the insert velocity. And this will be under MIDI. You could set up your own keyboard shortcuts just to trigger those particular functions like that. All right, just reading through some comments. So we're seeing a question. Why do you suppose Steinberg has not updated the MIDI learn MIDI mapping? It really could depend upon the plugin itself. Like, a lot of plugins that you have in Cubase can be MIDI learned, MIDI mapped. But one of the things that a lot of people don't take advantage of that I find is kind of using the quick control. So in this way, because a lot of MIDI controllers have 8 encoders. So, once people I see kind of, dial in their quick controls for track quick controls for their controller and VST quick controls and start assigning the quick controls, that it works really well for them. So it's kind of a different approach. But, like a lot of the Steinberg plugins, you could just kind of, right click. So let's say if I come here to, and I have a retro log. So we'll go under synth and we'll select retro log. A lot of these you just right click, learn CC. So it really depends, but if you open up another plugin, it could be help when you right click on a parameter. So it could really depend upon the plugin manufacturers and how they implement it as well. Okay, so just going through different questions that are coming up here. Sorry, just got out of place a little bit. Let me just scroll back. Okay, so we have lots of questions still to get through. All right, so we have about maybe 15 more minutes and we'll try to plow through some questions here. Thanks everyone for wonderful questions. So seeing Greg do any reason I don't use the latest version, let me just check my Cubase. So I'm running the latest 9.53. So I think that's the latest Cubase version. Some of my projects may say older versions. All right, so it says, all right, about question about the sampler track. So come here, let's say we right click, we create a sampler track. Okay, so what that actually does, and the question is about, can I save the audio sample to the current project audio folder? So I think if we go to the pool window, you actually just see them under the sampler track. So you could just, I think you could, so it just shows up under the sampler track right here. So it's within the audio folder, but a subfolder of the sampler track. And then if you want to save it to the current project folder, you could right click on that. And I think if you did a prepare archive, that would place it into the same folder. So you see a question, is it possible to lock a group of notes in the key editor? So let's take a look. So if I come here, you could lock the event. I know you could do this kind of, you could lock the events on the project window, but I'm not sure if they could be locked within the editor. So I don't think so, but I want to say that there's a slight chance. I'll see if it kind of pops in my head. All right, so we had a question: how can we create new filters and metadata in the media bay? And does the metadata goes in the Cubase database, or is it written into the audio file? Sometimes it's written into the audio file, but we had to do in the media bay, and it could depend on, it could be written in but not read by other programs. So if you go to the setup window here, make sure that you go to the attribute inspector, and we'll say we select an audio file. And on the right hand side, what you want to do is just go to settings, and then you could kind of click on plus. And if you want it to be a number, a yes, no. So I used to go through, like, I got a bunch of drum loop CDs where, a bunch of files would just, be like 3 good loops and 977 bad ones. And I just made one that said, does this drum loop suck? And then that could be your own metadata that you've added in here. So you could just kind of click here on the settings and click on plus, and then you could add your own metadata for filtering. So I see a question: Cubase is the best DAW. Do I agree? I do. I think it's really quite a fun program. All right, so it's someone checking in from Amsterdam, Night Orchestra. Good to see you. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, I'm Hammett Campos. As I'm completely blind, does Cubase have keystrokes I can use? Yeah, And you could totally customize your Cubase keyboard shortcuts. I've done work with Stevie Wonder in the past, setting up his Cubase system. It's one of the reasons why we would make special versions for Stevie if he couldn't do something non-visually. So, and we figured out that any feature that made something better for blind people made it better for sighted people as well. So you could come over here and set up your key commands for any function in a program. So we have many blind users running Cubase. Okay, so I think Patrick Sevenson, that we kind of went through a lot of, I see a couple questions about the saving project. So I think the backup project does it. All right, just going through different comments here. All right, so we had a question. Can there be two separate mix consoles with different plugins and levels in one session, or are multiple mix the only for viewing different tracks? It's really the multiple mixers are for doing different tracks. You can, and I think you may have mentioned it earlier that you didn't want to necessarily in the mix console, come over here and just jump to a project here with some audio in it. Oh, sorry about that. Didn't like that. We'll just reopen here. So you can save mixers, but I don't think it's kind of what you want to do with that particular setting. Okay, so we had a question. Can you demonstrate how to chop up a drum break? So I'm assuming it's probably like a drum loop. So let me just. So let's say I have a drum loop here. And let me just set my connections again real quick. Sorry about that. So what a lot of people would do is to just kind of, come here, go to your hit points, and create slices. And then you could, take each of the slices and move it around as you see fit. Now, one handy thing that you could do in Groove Agent, if you use Groove Agent SE, is the ability to take a drum loop, and we'll put it onto an instrument pad. Take a drum loop onto an instrument pad, and now slice that drum loop up. And now each slice is one of the parts, and it's created a pattern pad for us that we could drag onto the project window. So now if I wanted to take this particular drum loop here, we'll copy it a couple times. And let's say I'll just wanted to kind of deconstruct a drum loop. And let me just take it off. Step input mode. All All right, so now I could just kind of take that, what was as kind of a standard drum loop, and flip it around, change it around, still keep the same groove. So that's handy. So that's a good way to kind of chop up drum breaks. So see, can we create a key command that toggles the mains on, phones off, vice versa in the control room? Let's take a quick look. So I think if you set the dim signal all the way down, you might be able to do it. And then your phone's channel right there. So it looks like you could do it from some of the built-in key commands. So I see a question: is there a plan to restore video plus audio mix export functionality in an upcoming update? The developers are very well aware of it, and I keep kind of badgering them about that functionality as well. So, all right. So, quick question, like how to make a drum beat in Cubase. So let's say, one of the handy tools that a lot of people forget that's around is just going to be like Beat Designer. So let's say I wanted to just come right here, we'll solo this. And if you go to like MIDI inserts, you can now just kind of come directly to Beat Designer. So you could do stuff like that quite easily using, and that could go out to kind of any MIDI device. All right, got just a couple more minutes for questions. Thanks everyone for great questions. I hope everyone's learned a couple tricks. Okay, like we have a question kind of how to change pitch over time. So let's say if I wanted to come here for like an audio event. So if we're here and the example is to change like snare. So let's say if I just wanted to take so let's say we have like right where we have this drum fill going on, this snare fill. If I wanted to change the pitch on that, you could just select the range of that. And if you hit F7, this will open up the direct offline processing, and there's pitch shift directly here. And one of the cool things is you can switch to an envelope view. So you can set your range here. So let's say you want to set it to 1 octave. So now when we play that back, that's been processed. So we should hear the so you could do stuff like that if you wanted to. All right, with that, it's 4 o'clock, so we've gone for 3 hours and we've done lots of topics. I know we didn't get to every question. We have a lot, but it'll be archived and we'll try to get to these questions in the next Hangout. I want to thank everyone for wonderful questions and such great turnout for the Hangout. And if you have questions that you want to send in advance, you could please send them to clubcubase@steinberg.net. If you found the Hangout helpful, please feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can get notified of future Hangouts. Thanks again for all the wonderful questions. I hope everyone's learned a tip or trick. I will try to have an index up by tomorrow with all the topics so people can navigate quickly. And once again, thank you so much. And we'll go ahead and wrap up because I have to go pick up my son from school. And we'll choose to just wrap up